O abundant Athenian, bearing the gift that your angular branches reliably lift, as a condiment spicing the bowl of Arcadia, never on soils that are damper or shadier, holding the sun and translating its beauty in savoury, nourishing, life-giving booty. What made you descend on this desolate place that's deprived of urbanity, culture and grace, an immeasurable zone without landmarks or taste, where the spread of the landscape itself goes to waste? From the hallowed metropolis lording the seas to the tiniest towns of the Peloponnese, you belong to communities, people who talk in the densest of regions where citizens walk. You're conversant with myths, in each town with a god, that arise from the earth to the name of the clod. With your cousins in Pyrgos or in Elis or Pylos, each friend that you passionately honour as Philos, your cousins in Delphi and Thebes that you're with, are as one in their closeness to language and myth, irrespective of growing in groves or alone, or on plains or the foreshore or mountainous zone. What possessed you to leave and abandon that place, to migrate to this realm of unsocialized space, so remote from spectacular rich Kalamata or famously tough and original Sparta? What folly induced you to journey so south, so beyond the inviting Corinthian mouth, to a southernness further than south can extend, to a place where the southern approaches the end, the Antipodes, beautiful land to be sure, but where life in the street is so meagre and poor, where all spaces beneath the great southerly stars are uniquely designed for the empire of cars. It's a place without people. There's no one to meet. Not a soul can be found who inhabits the street. It's an emptiness made of fastidious lawns and a garden aesthetic that tires and yawns because no one converses and no one is there, so aesthetically pretty yet socially bare. You're a farmer who loves to donate without cease, such a noble and provident symbol of Greece. What you give in such volume is always renewed, your unstinting and fond dedication to food, your committed to nurture, to food as a whole, to the seasonal ritual of filling our bowl and enriching our health for both older and younger, at once overwhelming and serving our hunger, distributing manna, this fruit that's like meat, with its magical substance a liquid to eat, the most flavoursome food that the goddess could think, which is either prepared as a food or a drink, fatty provender brimming with godly repute, from deliciously bitter and beautiful fruit. You're the generous and rich horticultural vector of solids and juice, both ambrosia and nectar, comestible, grown for all culinary use, from the savoury fruit to extravagant juice. So impressively peppery, lively and quick, but inert, and so viscous, so happily thick. This titration of sunshine and minimal soil that distills as that green and delectable oil. Horticultural stalwart, so healthy and whole, you're the tree with the Mediterranean soul. You belong in libations, in gifts of the chalice, as holy for humans as sacred to Pallas, for babies and heroes on cradles or biers, and enfolded in rituals for thousands of years. Even so, the extensive poetic belief in the peace-bringing sign of the legendary leaf provides joy by a keg that no stopper can stanch from the scraggly yet graceful proverbial branch. You're a socialized tree. You perform what is right. You're obliging and gentle and modest in height, like the apple, the pear, more than trellis and grape. You're a handy, convenient, globular shape, with dimensions to handle the drought and the storm in your handsome and tight geometrical form, as an object of artifice fashioned by hand, that traditions since mythical times understand, as a partner with farmers to relish the wound that encourages growth when you're prudently pruned. You've grown up among humans with blankets and rods for extending your branch to the bliss of the gods. Then what fantasy seized you and made you migrate to a place that the muses refused to translate, where unsocialized suburbs are all that there is, and where fences define what is hers and what's his? A most spacious arrangement of rude isolation, where space is conceived to avoid a relation or contact with people, the life of the street or the plaza or square where the citizens meet. In its place, there are fences, innumerable fences, neurotically cleaving to private defences, retirement, removal from people and joy, which are seen as disruptions and noise that annoy. Misanthropic domain of the spacious front yards that ubiquitous fencing so jealously guards. How remote from Hellenic exchange and vivacity, striving since Plato for thought and sagacity. Spaces and fences with gardens galore. It's a buffer extending from pavement to door. How appalling to find yourself part of the guard that defines the defensive suburban front yard. You're a product of infinite rich conversations in streetscapes of passionate social relations. Your neighbours are purposeless, insular trees that are touched by a grim antisocial disease. Their objective is anal. Admire and then pass. Show respect for the owner and keep off the grass. Both exotic and natives agree on this task which the military gardenized protocols ask, to ensure that the land remain perfectly free of the presence of people, their talk and their glee. It's a zone that's devoted to absence, a space where the presence of humans remains a disgrace. So the purpose of plants is to sterilize land, to protect it from humans who've nowhere to stand, and thus cleanse the estate of all humanoid trace to establish this perfect unsocialized space. How anomalous then that you stand on this ground where a talkative human is not to be found. All your neighbours with whom you share soil at the root are indigenous trees of inedible fruit, or of foreign complexion and classical sound, which can only be useful for hanging around. In the face of a task, they are lazy and shirk. They are all unfamiliar with cultures of work. Only you have a handle on moral instruction. It's you who's devoted to bedrock production. O taciturn migrant, your purpose is true, like a diligent worker who knows what to do. A reliable servant of worthy ambition who stands in attendance in every condition. An ethical labourer, strong in the arm, and absorbed in the tasks that belong with a farm. Your entire understanding of who you must be is to live as a working and socialised tree. You're immune from all laziness, sloth and obstruction. Your character's tied to the boon of production, unstinting and generous, given to peace and to making the foodstuffs and symbols of Greece. What indignity brings you to have to consort with the misanthrope stuck in this desolate court? You're the genius of farming, beloved of gods, who invented all seeds and all fruit and all pots. The original twig of the goddess of reason, the treasury gathering sun from its season, as much as your tireless production is able, and bringing the nourishing fruit to the table. O patient exemplar, whose gifts are revealed on the learned poetic Elysian field. Among what kind of bludgers and champions of ease do you find yourself idle and shooting the breeze? There is nothing productive or useful or good among loafers whose mumbles are not understood, who make noises and grumble, complain to the air that the world is corrupted, a mess and unfair, but who wait for a boon, dispensational lurk, for protecting the national reluctance to work, as they never make inroads with useful production, but pompously scorn the travails of construction, who deprecate labour as driven by profit, vituperate welfare, although they live off it, who idly look down on exertion and stress, and yet moan if there's something they don't yet possess. This entitled fraternity, windbags at large, are your neighbours and senior officials in charge, overpaid, overfed, and extremely devoted to spreading their girth and becoming more bloated. Who envies their privilege, their fat and acclaim, when they envy your sturdy and muscular frame, your delight in a purpose and hungry condition, contented to follow your pauper's tradition? It suits you, perhaps, to be garrisoned here, where the virtues of culture will never appear. You are suited to hostile geographies, land that's malnourished and parched from the clay to the sand. And Australia itself is ideal for your feet, that can handle the drought and the blistering heat. You've adapted through many millennia past to withstand the assault of the harrowing blast. If the winds of the suburbs that rage and assail might compare with a Mediterranean gale, and you're bred for the highest of winds, then of course you are able to cope with their impact and force. If you struggle, it's only by dint of excess, like superfluous water, that causes you stress. Inundations that pompous conventions impose for maintaining the lawn with a profligate hose turn the sands into sludge, and this waterlogged soil is repugnant to trees that are makers of oil. Or the lavish abundance of fertilised gunk might intoxicate plants that refuse to be drunk. There is surplus nutrition for plants, dog and cat. Even Puritan Stoics must learn to be fat. The supply is unending where waste is espoused. Who can guess with what volumes the grasses are doused? Who can guess what is spent for botanical taste in the endless suburban devotion to waste? It's a waste that extends to the very designs of the properties built along gardenised lines, where the openness must be protected by law, where the emptiness legally sits at the core. The existence of gardens of generous space has afforded a right to superfluous grace, where entitlement, waste and extravagance rule, needing millions of cars and inordinate fuel for transporting the masses through hectares of waste among people so far and sporadically spaced. From a country where people have joy in their squeeze to a city where people are rarer than trees, you embody the memory, hold the motif of a close-living people at one with the leaf, where the tree is at home on the busiest street, from the hubbub of Metz to the hillsides of Crete. If you'd come to this land only centuries back, when there wasn't a street or a prospector's shack, in the time before British explorers arrived, a magnificent spatial integrity thrived, where the bush was inhabited densely with song, amid landmarks where spirits and stories belong. Every gully and cleft, every plain, every hill was possessed of a fabulous narrative thrill, and its reason to be in a cosmos where natural spirits walk free. If you'd come at that time when indigenous land was astutely maintained by indigenous hand, you'd have entered a landscape of kinship and ties that extend between all that all creatures comprise. You'd have witnessed a magic collective ideal, where the people would neither make fences nor steal, where relations would flourish in fairness and parity, built by traditions in spiritual clarity, richly endowed with an order and law that endured since the dawn of all ages before. When the British arrived and demolished the bush and established their forceful competitive push, they depleted the stock, did away with the chant, and rejected all species that they didn't plant, while they fattened the country with money and folk to the point that consumers of capital choke. They would empty the bush of its meaning and vigour to make themselves richer and stronger and bigger. The result of their pillage is seen where you stand, as the empty condition of gardenised land. If you'd come before Western invaders assailed, when indigenous wisdom and nature prevailed, you'd have taught us your great horticultural charm, and indigenous folk would have learned how to farm, for producing this exquisite fruit of the soil, as that fat of the land, that delectable oil, agricultural spoil and a culinary pride. No decoction is good if it isn't inside. But instead you arrived many centuries late, when the British exported their fences and gate, and the beautiful land was locked up and divided, with privacy final, extreme and one-sided. Oh, Antiquity's grove dweller, couldn't you move to a place of which poets and heroes approve? To a somewhere that isn't so bare and exposed, so compulsively empty, contained and enclosed. You remember the concourse, lamenting, you yearn, you belong in a place where you'll never return. But at least you can languish in peace and in years, with a prosperous ending to comfort your tears.